Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint and Office 365 community webinar. My name is Shane and I am delighted to be joined by Azhar Amir, who will be talking to you about what is the right SharePoint deployment option. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC16. Book before the end of September and you will be in with a chance to win a Microsoft Surface Pro 4 for the European SharePoint Conference. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you have for Azhar in the questions window. Some questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and you will be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Azhar Amir. Hello, Azhar.
Hi Shane, thank you so much for the introduction.
Yeah, we can see your presentation there, Azhar, so take it away.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining the webinar. The topic that I am going to talk today is on what is the right SharePoint deployment option. The agenda which I am going to cover today, we will talk very briefly about what are the current pain points for enterprises with their SharePoint deployments. We will also look at the options of SharePoint deployment. What are the various options that are possible? We will also look at what is the cloud value, when you move your current SharePoint implementations, which are on-premise to cloud. We will also look at an analysis of the various options and look at the pros and cons, while we also will do a compare of these various options. We will also look at the challenges, that we typically encounter when we try to move from our on-premise implementations to the cloud implementations as well. And finally, I will summarize all these options and lead it into questions at the end of the sessions. Okay. So talking about the SharePoint deployment, enterprises which have SharePoint deployed today, typically, the deployments are on-premise. If you look at the way SharePoint has evolved, right from March 2007, 2010, 2013, and now 2016, some of the pain points, that enterprises have today is, with a multi-region deployment. When you have your SharePoint deployed, and your requirement is to have the implementation available across many regions, you will have certain issues and challenges about how to manage the environment itself. Apart from managing the environment in a multi-region scenario, you also will have issues around the complexity involved in managing the processes that have been implemented. The implementations can be, an intranet implementation, an internet implementation, a website, or any applications that you have built on the SharePoint platform itself, and you want to take this deployment across various regions in the globe. So you will have issues around, where do I have my deployment? Whether it should be in a specific region. If it is in a different region, how do I ensure that the users who are going to access will not have issues around, things like latency, things around uh, uh, how the implementations which are deployed in a specific region can be moved, let us say, to a different region. Okay, if you have your deployment in the US region and you have users across the globe, let us say in the APAC region or in the Europe region, you also have to look from the aspects whether you need to have multiple forms in place. How do you go ahead and move the content? How do you ensure that the content that you have deployed in a specific region flows across all these various regions? And also there might be some very specific applications and data and content which will be required only for a particular region. How do we go ahead and control it? The other issue is around, the compliance. Today, if you look at the implementations, any large enterprise, if it is working on a specific domain, let it be a retail, finance, banking, insurance, they will need to adhere to a standard set of compliance. So you also need to look from the perspective that your deployment adheres to these standards. And also enterprises have their own security standards as well. So these deployments should enable the security standards of a particular enterprise, and also there is proper governance in implementation of these standards. And the other option, the other challenge is in terms of the usage and leveraging of the cloud capability. Today, enterprises want to save on cost. They want to ensure that their focus is on their business rather than spending time and money on supporting and managing the environment. So enterprises have, the architects have always been thinking how to make it easier, and looking at some of the new technology options that are available, enterprises want to leverage the cloud aspect as well. And finally, the cost efficiency aspect of it, which is the key reason, for a business to go ahead and choose a platform like SharePoint and ensure that there is enough cost efficiency and optimization they can achieve because of this deployment. Typically, in enterprises today, if you look at the SharePoint forms, you will have a multi-form scenario and also a multi-vendor scenario, and there is very limited control on the SharePoint environments, which leads to huge amount of cost, and also not a very optimal or an enterprising business case for business to go ahead and use SharePoint in their enterprise. So these are, some of the key challenges, or I would say the pain points of, current implementations of SharePoint. So moving towards the desired state, from their current state and looking at all these challenges, the desired state or the target state, there are certain parameters which needs to be looked into. Parameters like cost efficiency, how we can look at upgrading or moving the current implementations which can be highly cost efficient, and also look from the perspective of improving the quality of service. The services which are being delivered today from SharePoint, there are issues around the quality of the services. So how moving towards a new or the desired target state environment, how the QoS can be improved is also a parameter which enterprises should very closely look into. The other aspect is in terms of enhancing governance. Governance is a very, very key aspect of any SharePoint deployment. If you don't have a proper governance in place, it will lead to an SharePoint implementation which will be extremely difficult to support and maintain. With no control over any processes or how the SharePoint has to be used, it's a nightmare managing the SharePoint environment. So on the target state, you will also have to look in building a very robust and highly enhanced governance to support the platform. And then you have the process optimization itself. Moving towards a different implementation option, or even, let us say, upgrading from your existing deployment to a newer version of SharePoint, it gives you an option of optimizing your processes. It can be, your existing business processes, how it can be optimized. It can be in terms of integrations. Where you have your existing applications which have been integrated, but the processes are not optimized. So this is also another end state parameter which has to be closely looked into. And then finally, on the options which are available in terms of new technology. Before the advent of the cloud, there were very limited options in terms of the way that SharePoint could have been deployed. But today, with various options and even some of the new features that SharePoint delivers, you get an option of choosing a newer technology which can give you more benefits in terms of your cost, your quality of service, governance, and the process optimizations itself. So with this, looking at the current state problems and what are the various parameters that you have, to optimize in your future state, let us very briefly look at what are the various options for deployment. Typically, if you see today, deployments of SharePoint are traditional, which means they are on-premise. The infrastructure, is basically hosted and it is completely managed by the company itself. It is on-premise, and it's a huge capex model, and also which leads to a kind of low elasticity. Now, looking at other options, Microsoft has come up with Office 365, where you can try to leverage the SharePoint online workload capability. So this will give you a kind of an SaaS model where you can leverage the SharePoint implementation as a SaaS service. Okay, so SharePoint Online, basically it will bring all your SharePoint technology together in an online scenario with complete good managed service option. But again, you need to look at from a feasibility perspective as well. Because SharePoint Online is more of a lightweight version of the enterprise version of the SharePoint, and you will have to see what are the kind of applications or your sites that can be moved to SharePoint Online. Then you also have another option where you can look at an hosted or a VPC kind of an implementation. So what Microsoft has been doing is with their entry into the cloud, apart from the Office 365, which is a SaaS-based option, you also can look into an IaaS or a infrastructure as a service or a platform as a service kind of an option for hosting your SharePoint. I'm going to talk about some of these capabilities and advantages and benefits of moving either towards an SaaS or a PAAS or an IaaS kind of a model, or typically, go ahead with your traditional on-premise implementations. So in summary, you have a public cloud option, you have your traditional on-premise option, you have an hosted option where you can look at using Azhure on a public cloud, or you can also look at an private cloud kind of an implementation for your new SharePoint. So moving ahead, what is the cloud value with these deployments, right? Today, when enterprises want to go ahead and make this decision on moving towards cloud, it also comes with, apart from the cost efficiency part, there is another key aspect that we need to look into is the control. Your typical SharePoint on-premise implementations, you will have a full control on your hardware, your size, scale, and you can roll your own, availability, disaster recovery, and scaling aspect of it. And if you move towards an hosted SharePoint, let us say you look at an IaaS or a PAAS kind of an option, you can the control of the environment tends to become lesser. Okay, I'm going to talk in the next few slides on what are the various aspects which will be in control of the enterprise itself, and what will be in the control of a vendor. Let us say you look at option of moving your SharePoint on your hosted environment like Azure or Amazon or any other cloud provider. What is the level of access and control that you might have? Then finally, the Office 365, the software as a service option. So the entire environment is managed by, let us say, Microsoft itself. So the control of the environment is with the cloud provider. Any upgrades, any changes to the environment will be taken care by the cloud provider. But what it also means is, though there is an huge amount of cost efficiency that you are bringing in, the control that you will have on the environment will become lesser and lesser. Office, what you can do basically is, you can go ahead and build your applications which you can control, but any changes to the environment, be it adding new service packs, upgrading any versions, all those are basically under the control of the cloud provider. So in summary, as you look at these various choices of moving towards cloud, the control becomes lesser for the customer, and the cost efficiency definitely is going to increase and will create a very good business case. But the environment control will be primarily with the cloud provider itself. So moving on to the next slide, SharePoint today, the way that it has evolved, it has been repositioned today as an cloud-based collaboration platform. Okay, so you look at the way that we started with 2001, 2003, 2007, 2010, and 2013, and now 2016. There is huge amount of workloads which are basically moving on to the cloud. SharePoint in itself, right, will not give you all the capabilities of collaboration and the value of collaboration unless you go ahead and utilize the other workloads, be it features like Yammer, be it Skype for Business, be it your new mobile capabilities, building app-based solutions and applications, or even the cloud-based email integration. So the value is by integrating and using all these new cloud collaboration-based features, which will enhance the value of SharePoint in an organization. So when you go ahead and devise a strategy for SharePoint, if until and unless you look from the overall perspective of unified communication strategy, your mobile and touch experience, your collaboration and cloud implementations, and the social collaborations of implementations which are available, the realization of the entire value is going to be very difficult. So it is very important that you look at all the options that are available on how SharePoint can be deployed before making a decision and investing into a SharePoint based solution. So in this slide, I very briefly want to touch. I was talking about the various aspects of cloud offering, which was a SaaS-based offering, a PAAS offering, an IaaS offering, or the on-premise or the traditional way how today SharePoint is deployed. From on the left-hand side, as you can see, when you have your own environment, which is controlled by you, you manage everything. You manage the apps, your data, your runtime, the OS, server, storage, networking, everything is under your control. In case of infrastructure as a service, let me take an example of Azhur itself. Okay, what you have is the virtualized servers, the storage, the networking is basically under the green, all the green boxes, right? All these are under the control of the cloud provider. But the other aspects like, your applications, data, runtime, all these can be managed by the enterprise or the customer himself. Which is where, right, going back to my previous slide where I spoke about the correlation between cost efficiency and the control. Here you can see starting with a complete on-premise implementation, everything, all the boxes which are in orange, gives you the complete control. But in your IAAS kind of a scenario, your control is becoming lesser. And if you go towards a platform as a service, yeah, you can see that what you are managing is becoming much lesser. In a platform as in service scenario, you end up only managing your applications and data, and the other aspects are completely managed by the vendor. And finally, the other option as well, right, which is not delivered as part of your Azure offerings, but Office 365. What it leads there is, the entire platform itself is offered as a service. So you save a lot of money, time in terms of managing your environment itself. You reduce your operation risks. It gives you, very easy scalability across many geographical locations, and also brings in a lot of capabilities of integration when you start using a platform which is already available. So moving on, let us do a quick analysis of the various options that are available, right? We spoke about the SaaS option, which is the Office 365. Then we have the hosted option, which can be your IAAS PAAS kind of an option, and then you have on-premise. So what are the things, that are in the control, and what are in the control of the vendor, and what is in the control of the client, is something that you have to look into. Basically, your the application support part of it is managed in case of an Office 365 kind of an scenario. It is managed by the customer, by the client himself. In case of the virtual private cloud or the hosted, it is managed by the client, and in case of on-premise as well, it is managed by the client. In terms of the SharePoint administration, it can be delegated to Microsoft, or it can be managed by the client. In case of your SharePoint services, your content DB and backups, and your operating system, storage, etc., you can see that it is managed by the customer's client by in few scenarios, and basically the entire infrastructure part is managed by the platform provider itself. So moving on, what are the various pros and cons? When you look at your comparison of your on-premise, virtual private, your hosted options, and the Office 365 capabilities, let us do a quick compare of the options that are available. In a public cloud kind of a scenario, right, the pros is basically you have very least effort, you have very fewest touch points or contracts, and the model completely is OpEx driven. Okay. But in the cons are in terms of the feature set that you are going to get becomes very, very restrictive. The overall scalability is below par, and integration and security challenges will exist. When you move towards a public cloud kind of an implementation. In scenarios where you have hosted your SharePoint, it will give you a very good scalability. It is also OpEx driven, and you have fewer touch points, and you have control as well. The cons are in terms of the secure integration with right level of performance. You have to look into the kind of environment and the tenancy that is being used to deploy your SharePoint, and how you can basically overcome all these security and integration challenges. In on-premise, as I already said, you have the control of the entire environment. Then least integration and security effort because the entire environment is in your hands. But the cons are, basically scalability is an issue. When you want to do scalability, you need to plan, you need to procure the hardware, you need to inform the vendors. It is CapEx driven. There are multiple touch points, not completely integrated services. So you need to basically weigh all these options before you go ahead and decide what is the right choice that you need to make for your deployments. So in the next slides, right, I want to get basically a bit more detail into what are the things that are available. What are the features that are available or which can be controlled when you look into an SharePoint Online kind of an option, or you look into an SharePoint on Azure or any other cloud hosted kind of an option. In case of SharePoint Online, if you have made a decision to go ahead and implement this with SharePoint Online, then from a SharePoint administration, you will have to do the SharePoint administration, customization of SharePoint for business needs and governance and compliance of these apps. Okay. In case of when you are moving your SharePoint onto Azure, your work or effort will be also leading to server administration. You will have to also look from the perspective of managing your servers. If you are completely on an IAAS, you will have to look from the capacity, deployments, updates, recovery, etc. And also you will get customization capability. Okay, in case of SharePoint Online, the customizations that you can, capability that you can get is very, very limited. But when you go ahead and host the SharePoint, a full-fledged version of the SharePoint on an Azure, you get this capability of building your own customizations. Further, moving on to the next slide, in terms of the access and the control, when you are on SharePoint Online, the administration capability of your entire SharePoint form is very limited. There are limitations in terms of you can have one public site collection, you can have one or more internal site collections only. You can only go ahead and implement only sandbox based solutions. The feature sets that are available in SharePoint Online, which I'm going to talk about in detail in the next few slides, are very limited. And before you decide, what applications you can move towards SharePoint Online, you need to do an proper feature compare as well. But when you look at this option of having your SharePoint on Azure, you will have full form level administration control. You can go ahead and build multiple web applications, site collections, and also you can go ahead and implement your own full trust solutions. So basically, all your capabilities, right, that you used to have in your on-premise implementations, you will have all of them when you go ahead and host SharePoint completely on Azure itself. So moving on to the next slide. This slide is basically looking into what are the various feature sets, that you would want to leverage when you are trying to go ahead and build your SharePoint. Hello, Shane, can you see the screen?
Hi Azhar, yeah, I can see your screen there. You've just come out
Okay.
of your PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, yeah, sorry, somehow I clicked on the wrong button. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, coming back onto the slide. So, in terms of comparison of various feature sets that are available, sure. Yeah. In terms of the feature sets which are available, you before you go ahead and decide, what is going to be your option for deployment, you also have to look into the requirements of your enterprise and the feature sets that are available today, and how you can go ahead and leverage these features, and you can to make an right choice of the SharePoint deployment. Uh, the requirements typically when you go ahead and build your SharePoint solutions is around document storage. You can look into aspects of online collaboration, customizations for your visual experience, having search capabilities, workflow capabilities, looking at BI features, the app model, whatever has come up as part of the new 2013 feature. Then custom integration with on-premise applications, web content management, things like your cross-site publishing, security, full trust solutions, change and release, and managed path. Basically, URL, the ease of use of the URLs. Okay. So what is available today in your SharePoint on-premise, and when you move towards the online or the hosted option, what are the features that are available? Let us look at it and do a quick check on the same. In terms of the basic document storage, right? You have all the features available. If you go the SharePoint Online way or the hosted SharePoint way, you will get all the features. If you are looking for online collaboration, yes, you get all the capabilities across all these various options. Coming to customizations, yes, you have capabilities. But if you have to go ahead and implement your own custom code in Office 365 SharePoint Online, it is difficult. But yes, there is limited capability, I would say, which you can use. Search, yes, there are search capabilities. There are workflow capabilities as well available, which you can use. But in SharePoint Online scenario, these options are pretty limited. The same with BI. If you are planning to build an BI kind of an application or a platform, the capabilities on SharePoint Online are a bit limited. Coming back to the app model, right? You with the 2013, yes, you have your app model capabilities, but with with SharePoint Online, if you go ahead and implement any of your app model, you will have to only look at the client-side scripting part of it. the seesaw part of it. But if you have to go ahead and implement any server-side code, then you will have to look at having apps which can be deployed onto a separate form. There are ways of handling it, but in the platform itself, as SharePoint Online, it will be a challenge. Custom integrations, you'll have to look from the perspective if you have any requirements of integrating with your on-premise applications, there'll be challenges around the same. Similarly, for your federated search, if you want to do any federated search, there are challenges in the online environment. Even in terms of your web content management, deploying your full trust solutions, or your change and release control over the platform itself. So as you can see, if you are moving from your current on-premise implementations to an hosted Azure, the feature sets that you are going to get or everything is available. Almost everything is available, but you will have to look from the perspective of the kind of change that is going to happen in the architecture when you are moving your applications onto the cloud. But if you make a choice of moving towards Office 365, there are a large set of features, which will not meet your requirements. So the choice that you are going to make in terms of selecting your applications, will also depend on what is available today with the SharePoint Online itself. Okay, so the next few slides, right, I'm going to talk about, what are the challenges that you are you might face when you are moving, when you look at an option of moving from your existing on-premise to an hosted kind of an scenario. Basically, some of them are I have quite categorized this into one is on-premise and the rest of it, right, the online and the hosted part of it into one category. So when you're looking from a migration aspect, right, no form solutions, you have to basically check and validate if any of your deployment options will be a fitment for the right solution, whether it's a form-based solution you are looking at, or a SharePoint hosted solution you are looking at, or an app hosted. So based on your end state that you are going to decide and the kind of applications that you are going to build and the level of customization that you are planning to have, the validation of the various solutions on internally how your SharePoint apps needs to be deployed has to be looked into very carefully. There is no host header site collections, there is no usage analytics, no content search web parts. And also you have to look from the perspective of the amount of content that you are trying to move into, let us say, SharePoint Online itself. Please check always in terms of the limitations. There are limitations in the size, be it your site collection size, the files size that you can upload, etc. Then the other issues that you also have to look also is in terms of customization options. Okay, whether it's an you want to go ahead and implement an app model. What is the kind of app model that you want to implement? Have a look at it and see that the recommended app model is going to meet your requirements. And if you are doing any REST or API calls, have a further look and see that the requirements of your REST and API calls are met. Any CSOM implementations on your applications, please do a closer look and see that your CSOM implementations are being met by the platform, because there are limitations in your SharePoint Online environment. Then look at your master pages and CSS. And when you are basically looking into migration or moving from your existing on-premise onto SharePoint Online, look at the options that you have, or you want to move on to your hosted cloud kind of an option. Look for your migration option. You will have multiple options. You can look for an tool-based, you can look for a manual option, or you can look for an hybrid option as well, which is a mix of tool and manual options. Okay. The other aspect is you have to also look from the perspective of security. What is the kind of users that you have currently in your enterprise? How many external users? How many internal users? And what is the kind of subscription you might require to meet the requirements of these users? Because again, SharePoint Online offerings in Office 365, right? They come up with different kinds of plans, and each plan has a set of features that are available, and there is obviously an cost associated with the right subscription choice that you are going to choose. So the next slides, right? I just want to give an solution overview. Typically, if you look into your choices of deployment, let us say you are doing a complete on-premise deployment, how the solution is going to look. The SharePoint, basically the form itself is going to reside in your network. There is full support for your customization because everything is under your control. You get availability of all services. You want to implement a fast search, you want to do a PPS or a BP, PCS kind of an implementations, all these features are available. And you also can look at integrating with your internal systems as well. Since everything is inside your network and under your control, the integration choices as well becomes much easier. And the systems will be maintained and supported by your IT team. You have to look into the aspects of your backup, DR, or of your environment, and how you want to go ahead and manage the backup and DR aspects of it. In case of Office 365, the form will reside on the Microsoft data center. You don't have any control on the environment. There will, because the Office 365 is a multi-tenant kind of an environment. Until and unless you are going for an what Microsoft calls as a dedicated environment, there will be issues around latency and network bandwidth. There are also issues around the services which are available. If you are looking at services like FAST, PPS, and BCS, they are not available. And the other aspects are there will be certain challenges in terms of integrating with your existing internal systems. You will have to come up with your own approach on how you want to integrate. And if you are moving the data, your internal data, out onto the public cloud, you will also have to look at how you want to secure the data which is going out of your network. All the systems will be maintained and supported by Microsoft. They have all the capabilities of your DR and backup build, and upgrades to the environment is completely taken care by Microsoft itself, in case of Office 365. Then coming back to the other option, right? We also have today enterprises, even if they decide to make a choice whether they want to move on-premise or they want to move on the cloud or use Office 365, uh, most of the enterprises will get into a scenario where they will have a mix of applications or sites, which they want to retain on premise, and also they will have a set of applications which they would want to move towards the cloud or the PAAS, IAAS, or the SAAS kind of an option. So in those scenarios, you will end up in an hybrid kind of an architecture, okay, where you can have your part of your implementation, anything which is related to your security, your compliance, and the data that you want to retain on your environment, you can continue and retain it on premise, and the applications and the data, which you want to move towards cloud, can be moved. So what you will basically have is, kind of an hybrid kind of an scenario where certain applications will be on the cloud and certain on-premise. So you will get a mix of both the worlds. So you get a mix of control of the environment on certain set of applications. You will have easier use of integrations or security or the features that you want to implement. You can have basically best of both the worlds, but you will also end up in a complexity of having to look at two different environments as well. So when you make a choice of the kind of deployment you want to go ahead with, you will end up in a hybrid scenario as well, which can be considered as one of the options also for deployment of SharePoint. So the next slide, basically this will be my final slide. This is about summarizing of your the various options that we discussed, the on-premise model, SaaS model, PAAS and IAAS model. The parameters basically that you need to look into are the cost and variability. What is the TCO, to the total cost of ownership? What are the overheads that are involved? What is the time to market? What are the current service levels, which are available or which needs to be met? What are the scalability and manageability requirements, ownership and governance? In your current state, let us say you have an on-premise implementation. Typically, your cost is fixed and you have an high upfront component. Basically, there is a capex which is involved if you are planning to start everything on an on-premise. The TCO is higher. There are overheads in terms of high communication and teams, multiple teams. Performance, weaker connectivity through links. Typically, there is a time involved for time to market, because you will have to go ahead and build this entire platform, make the platform ready, and then you can go ahead and start implementing your solutions. The service levels are fixed in your on-premise implementations. There is a finite scalability, okay, and to go ahead and scale out, there'll be a cost which will be involved. And there is also, if you want to scale in as well, right? Then what it means also, the investments that you have made also have to be will not be used in kind of scale in scenarios as well. Manageability low due to lack of control. The DR process is managing the entire environment and the infra, and having DR built will take effort. Ownership, you will have multiple teams owning different areas. Governance, different processes for different environments and regions. If you make a choice of moving towards an cloud-based kind of a model, so what you will have is the cost is usage-based. Okay, today typically when you move towards the cloud, you have pay-as-you-go kind of a model, or pay per service models. Okay, there is a potential reduction of 20 to 40%. I have seen personally in quite a few scenarios, the reduction is much higher as well. There is low communication overheads, direct connectivity across multiple regions and locations. The time to market is much lesser. Provisioning of new servers or new services is just click of buttons today, so it is much faster. The there is elasticity in scalability. You can scale up and scale down, and you only pay for whatever you are using. There is also enhanced manageability of monitoring, the HA design, the DR, everything is taken care of. There is single point of ownership and also single process and governance structure. So basically with that, right, I will conclude my webinar. In summary, you have a lot of good, in moving towards cloud, and also probably moving towards a hybrid kind of a model, which will give you a lot of benefits. So thank you so much for your time. I'm willing to take up any questions that you might have.
Great. Thanks, Azhar, for a great presentation. Some questions we have here are, what are the options for custom solution deployments to SharePoint Online?
Okay. So as I initially explained, right, SharePoint Online gives you basically a very limited customization capabilities. Okay, you can never have an full trust kind of an scenario in SharePoint Online, but you have capabilities of sandbox solution, and you can go ahead and also have this only the client side object model, where you can have JavaScripts for creating any of your apps. But in case of any other app that you want to implement, you will have to basically extend these capabilities into either Azhure, where you have an app which is created on a completely different technology and environment, and it can be controlled.
Brilliant. How to move SharePoint 2010 Farm to online, not using tools, any native approach?
Without using tools, I would see, basically there are, when you're trying to do any migration, there are multiple components that you need to look into. There is your data part of it, basically your content, how you want to move that content onto SharePoint Online. And then there is the visual interface part of it. So what I would say is data part, try to go ahead and use tools. For example, I have seen applications like document management system applications which are built on SharePoint Online, where you use an automated tool and you migrate all these data in an automated way to SharePoint Online, and you go ahead and completely build your UI on SharePoint Online. which will be a manual process. So I would say, the best is to go ahead and use an hybrid kind of an approach.
Okay. And is there any MS native approach to move data to online?
Native approaches, basically there are tools which are available, okay, which you can use. There are PowerShell scripts that you can write, which you can move your, let us say you have documents or your content which you want to move to SharePoint Online. So which are pretty easy to write and implement rather than going ahead and investing onto a third-party kind of a tool.
Great. Azhar, thank you so much for your time today. That was a great presentation. So thank you, Azhar.
Thank you very much, Shane. Thanks everyone for listening in, and also for any questions or discussing. These are my details. You can. I'm available on Twitter and LinkedIn, and this is my email ID as well. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Azhar. Okay, everybody, so for more top quality training from the world's best speakers, look no further than Vienna for the European SharePoint Conference. See SharePointEurope.com for full details. That's it for today. Remember to book your ticket before the end of September to be entered a chance to win a Microsoft Surface Pro. Okay, everybody, thank you for attending today's webinar, and goodbye.